Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rajat Mukherjee, and as Director General of the Broadband India Forum, I am delighted to extend a very warm welcome to each of you to another edition of the Digital Dialogues brought to you by Broadband India. We are extremely pleased to have this opportunity to organize this session, where BIF's Committee on ICT for Inclusive Ability for the Physically Weaker and Dependents has played a very key role in helping us put this session together. We take great pride in the small steps taken by BIF through the PWD committee in working towards digital inclusion for all. At BIF, we are constantly striving to improve and increase our engagement on digital accessibility, and we do hope to help create more impact going forward. This session today is part of our continued efforts in this space and is focused on creating awareness on the implementation of adopted standards. We need to keep in mind accessibility considerations across all our ICT initiatives and build this as an integral part of all our systems. Lack of accessibility adversely impacts not only persons with disabilities, but also older people and their families. It is therefore a mainstream issue and not an exclusive subject affecting only a few. It is an issue of big social import and as such deserves the attention and the concerted efforts of all the stakeholders, the government, industry, civil society, academia, service providers, and the public at large. In today's session, we have participation from some of the most eminent speakers who have learned to work with their disabilities and are striving to progress in this competitive world, making full use of digital technology. We will hear from them on the challenges faced by them and how we can better support them in participating in the mission and vision for creating a digitally inclusive India for all. Before we proceed to the formal events, let me announce that in our drive to promote accessibility in the digital communications world, we at the Broadband India Forum I think we were amongst possibly the very first to introduce sign language interpreters for all our webinars and events. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome today Dr. Renuka Rameshan, the President of the Association of Sign Language Interpreters, India, and her colleague, Mr. Saurav Roy, to do the interpretation for this important event. Dr. Renuka Rameshan holds a PhD in social work and is a senior sign language interpreter and trainer with an experience of 20 years in the field. Currently, she is also an executive member of the ISLRTC, which is the Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center. Accompanying her is Mr. Saurav Roy, who is a member of the Association of Sign Language Interpreters of India and a freelance sign language interpreter as well as in his own right. He has done his master's in extension and development studies and is proficient in English, Hindi, Bangla, Indian Sign Language, and the American Sign Language. For today's session, we also have Ms. Jahnavi Joshi as the special interpreter for our panel speaker, Mr. Zameer Dhale. Ms. Joshi is the co-founder of BLETech Innovations, an organization working in the deaf education sector through digital content and platforms. She also works and volunteers for ACDB, which is the Society for the Empowerment of Deaf Blind, for different projects. I will be moderating today's session. However, there's a panel discussion which will be moderated by Dinesh Chand Sharma. Some housekeeping announcements before we start the session. All speakers are requested to please keep their mics on mute if they are not speaking. Keeping your camera on is a matter of personal choice and convenience, except when speaking. However, in the event of a loss of bandwidth, my personal experience has been that switching off the camera seems to help. This event is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube, and the link will be shared with all the participants to revisit and share with your colleagues and friends as you wish. With these announcements out of the way, it is now my pleasure to invite Mr. T.V. Ramachandran, President of Broadband India Forum, to set the background for today's session.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramachandran needs little introduction to many of us. He's an esteemed industry veteran and has been part of the mobile telephony sector in India since its very inception. As the first CEO of Sterling Cellular in Delhi, and having established and led CEO for 12 years, he is also an honorary fellow of the IET London and global advisory member of the IET Future Tech Panel. TV, over to you.
Thank you, Rajat, and a very good morning to all of you. I would at the outset like to extend a very special warm welcome to our honorable chief guest, Shri Ajay Prakash Sani, former Secretary MeitY. We are extremely honored to have you here with us, sir. And also our special guest of honor, Shri Rajiv Sharma, Joint Secretary, Department of Persons with Disabilities, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Dr. Srinivas Ramakrishnan, former DG of CDAC, MeitY. Dr. Nirmita Narasimhan, Chairperson of BIF's Committee on ICT for PWDs, which Rajat referred to, that is behind this program today. She is the architect in a way with other colleagues of ours on the committee. She's also Program Director at Saksham and Senior Fellow and Program Director at G3 ICT. The co-chairs of the PWD committee.
वाराणसी गोरखपुर तो लिपिड के पास है.
There is some mic. The co-chairs of the PWD committee, Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma, Director SESI, Ms. Karishma Chabra, Lead Accessibility and Strategic Initiatives, Government Affairs Team, Microsoft. She's also one of the esteemed panelists in the forthcoming panel discussion. And Mr. Sharma is chairing and moderating the panel discussion. Our other esteemed panelists are Madam Reena Garg, Scientist F and Head of Electronics and IT Department, the Bureau of Indian Standards, and Mr. A. Chakravarti, Scientist E, STQC MeitY, Mr. Mohammad Asim Iqbal, Associate Director, PwC, Mr. Zamir Dale, Founder, Society for Empowerment of the Deaf Blind. Of course, my colleague, Mr. Rajat Mukherjee, Director General of BIF, and all you esteemed guest attendees and government and industry attendees, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. We are today discussing an extremely vital topic of facilitating ICT accessibility and use for the differently enabled, I would call them specially enabled people, which is a key thrust area and one of the fundamental missions of BIF. BIF is completely dedicated to this cause and has been working on it in its own small way for more than 1.5 to 2 years now. Our constant endeavor is to enhance engagements towards facilitating digital accessibility to one and all, like my colleague Rajat explained, especially to the differently abled and privileged. As you may have noted, we invite sign language interpreters for our programs to facilitate inclusive participation and outcomes. Moreover, the BIF website is also made accessible to all, and we host our virtual sessions on similarly accessible platforms. These are just little efforts. We have to do a lot more, and we hope to create more of an impact in this going forward and a lot more of awareness, which is required in the general public. You may be surprised to know that persons with disabilities comprise about 1 billion of the world's population. In India alone, I'm told, The estimates vary from 40 million to 80 million individuals living with various levels of physical, cognitive, or other disabilities. However, I personally believe that the figure is even higher than what we are talking about here, of 40 to 80. Moreover, we also have to recognize that our elderly persons, older persons, are also vulnerable in this respect in terms of ICT inclusivity. They face similar challenges in getting on to the ICT world and reaping the benefits therefrom. Many of them do not even, many of these underprivileged people in India do not have access to basic information and ICT communication technologies. And the learnings of the past few years, particularly during the pandemic, has shown very clearly that there is a huge plight in these marginalized groups, as they were left to struggle during the lockdown with little access to their caregivers or regular support mechanisms. We fail to appreciate this, being not ourselves impacted in this respect. So we need to help them to lead normal, respectful lives in such challenging situations. And the only way can be through providing better accessibility. Today's session is dedicated to providing an update on the ICT accessibility standards in India and the challenges around implementation of accessibility policy and standards in India. While robust legal and regulatory policies and frameworks for accessibility are available at both national level and international levels, the on-ground implementation of the same and the expected benefits or relief thereof they are supposed to bring needs more introspection, more awareness, more addressing. Fortunately for us, we have extremely learned experts in this domain who will share their valued views on the subject. I must mention here especially that many of our expert speakers in today's session are themselves differently abled. And it's so lovely of them to come forward and participate in this discussion. We cannot thank them enough for this. Thank you one and all for that, you esteemed panelists. We are privileged to have you all inspiring personae with us today and are proud to share the stage with them. I look forward to their kind inputs and interventions in the session. With these few words, I would like to hand over back to Rajat for proceeding with the session. Thank you all. Thank you, Rajat. Back to you.
Thank you very much, TV, for your warm words of welcome and introduction. And with this, I would like to now request the chairperson of BIF's Committee on ICT for Inclusive Ability for Persons with Disabilities, Dr. Nirmita Narasimhan, to please address the group. Nirmita, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajat. Good morning, everyone. I'm really proud today to be part of this panel, especially because this is something which we have been working towards for a long time. As a country, we have really been very pro-disability, pro-accessibility, and we have a lot of policies, legislations. And in that respect, the standard, now we have an Indian standard based on the global ICT procurement standard EN 301549. Now we have notified the Indian standard 17,802. And I think that's a very proud moment for all of us because at least in Asia, for sure, they're one of the oldest countries to have worked on this and notified it. What I hope we are now going to do with all the experts present here, many of whom have been part of the standard development process, who are part of the international standards work in their respective organizations, to shed light on what the standard is, what it means to implement the standard, as a country, what do we need to do to go forward? Because as we all know, it's easy, it's still easier to get a standard out of the legislation out, but what makes a difference on ground is the implementation, is the awareness, is the support that we give, the motivation that we have, the support that we give and the motivation that we have to adopt and implement this standard as a nation, as a country, each and everything that we do, the products that are produced, that are procured, the services that are there, the information that is there, out there. How do we all embrace this? And how do we make this a reality in the next 5 years or 2 years or 10? And, we have a timeline, we have a strategy, and what should we as a country and all the stakeholders, because all the stakeholders have been really active contributors to the standard, and without support, without a concerted effort of everybody, it's not one ministry domain or one sector domain. It is a national effort which we need, and we really look forward to seeing what everybody has to advise us and what we can take, how we can build on the discussion going forward. So with that, I hand over back to Mr. Rajat, and I really look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nirmita, for your words of direction and for acknowledging the fact that so much work has gone into developing this conversation today. And this is a dialogue which we will continue to have here at the Broadband India Forum. I now invite our special guest of honor, Dr. Srinivas Ramakrishnan, to give his special address. And before I hand the floor to him, let me quickly introduce him. Dr. Srinivas Ramakrishnan is former Director General at the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, which is generally known as CDAC, and is one of the key contributions has been in leading efforts in formulation and publication of Indian ICT accessibility standards through BIS since January 2021, and thereafter his follow-up efforts under the Knowledge and Resource Center for Accessibility in ICT, CAI project, which involved standardization, testing, quality certification, and finally publishing in the BIS. He has earlier served as the founder project director of EarNet, which rolled out the internet in 1989 for the first time in India for the academic and research community. He represents BIS in the Systems Committee on Active Assisted Living of International Electronic and Technical Commission, also known as the IEC, as head of the Indian delegation, and is a founding member of the Cloud Computing Innovation Council of India. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Respected Ajay Prakash Sani, Mr. TV Ramchandran, Rajat Mukherjee, Rajiv Sharma ji, fellow colleagues in the panel, many of them I worked with, and of course, the large number of participants online in the system. Thank you so much. It's a proud moment for all of us, as Nirmita was mentioning. So let me straight away go to slide share. Is my slides is there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So broadly, the scoping is how much progress you have made, as Nirmita very nicely captured it, and a little bit of touch of vision for the journey ahead. So, in a 1 minute nutshell, before 2020, it was GAGW 2.0, with WCAG 2.0 as the basis, was followed for web accessibility and was limited to government sites. Then the imperatives for making BIS standard, which since then has happened, is mainly because of the RPWD Act 2016 that needed a more comprehensive standard in multiple directions. If you read the RPWD Act, you'll notice that. Indian ICT Accessibility Standard I17802 was published as a result of it, largely due to the very high-speed effort during 2021. And of course, we are there entered into 2022 to complete that exercise and enter into an implementation phase. It consisted of two parts. Part one was requirements. It was published by BIS in December 2021. Part two was relating to determination of conformance, published by BIS in April 2022. To give a quick highlights, again 1 minute highlight, and what did the standard of BIS IS 17802 is. By the way, the standard is, unlike normal case, is available for free. All of you can download from the BIS site. It's available. It covers all functional disabilities, note, applicable to disabilities recognized by RPWD Act 2016. What we have done in the case of Indian standard is we have added Indian language requirements. All officially recognized, constitutionally recognized languages, 21 or so, have been added as well. It's covered in section 4. Covers closed systems and open systems. Those, what does the terminology mean? Those open systems are those to which assistive devices and software can be added, like the way normally we use mobile laptops and things of that kind. What are the closed systems? Things like kiosk, ATM, those are the examples of a closed system to which you cannot add anything. Covers a wide gamut of ICT products, services, and systems, from hardware to software, applications to content, multimedia content, in all 22 Indian languages I already mentioned. It covers in the respective chapters two-way audio, video, hardware, includes stationary ICT, keyboards, etc. Web, non-web documents. When I say non-web document, it includes not only the kind of a Word and PDF, it also includes things like email and so many other things. Multimedia, as I said. Software, support and support means all that comes along with the equipment or system services, emergency and relay services. These are all covered in sections 5 to 13. It has been harmonized with WCAG 2.1 EN 301549 latest version, which is version 3.1, and American Disabilities Act 508. Yet covers India-specific requirement. I just now mentioned about it. There are one or two other things beyond Indian languages. The testable criteria and procedure for determination of conformance are covered in part 2. The process adopted by the CAI project, which was awarded by MIT and funded by MIT, was that is the process, beginning of this journey. It was then taken up in BIS Subcommittee 35 on active assisted living, which in turn set up a special panel to give a high priority to this effort in preparing the ICT accessibility standard. The entire process from the start, first presentation to that committee to publishing of the standard, was completed in record 8 months, following due process of BIS, including things like public consultation. Apart from the subcommittee itself has a large number of members, many of them are present here today. Stakeholder consultation also had it at different points of time. You can see a glimpse of the kind of a stakeholder consultation. You find government agencies, so many line ministries, including DOT, Ministry of INB and many others, GEM and many others. Then you will find the industry consultation through different industry association, MAIT, NASCOM, BAF, IAMAI, Mobile, etc. Then you will find the next third row consists of the different standards and associated people. Dinesh was one instrumental person. We consultation was done. And then, of course, the core central point was Bureau of Indian Standards. Then there is a Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability, Accessible India campaign. All that was all integrated, including things like Daisy India Forum and other NGOs. Then, of course, the project implementation was done by CDAC. And then, because the Indian languages, TDL division of METI was also consulted. Then the implementation journey begins. That is all standards making, as Nirbita mentioned nicely. Standards kahani ho gaya. Actually, people were really looking forward to the standard for a long time. So the good news, therefore, is the time for celebration. Then celebration is the beginning. A series of awareness, capacity building, and train the trainers workshop have been conducted. You won't believe it. 8 awareness workshops, 4 capacity building workshops, 4 TTT workshops have been held in the last 6 months. A large number, at least participants would have been 500 to 1,000 people in all them put together. Engagement/consultation meetings with various stakeholders, users, developers, industry associations, sectoral players. Support to DPWD on revision of RPWD rule. Typically after an RPWD Act, there is a set of rules which gives it a legal power. When it goes into the court, the people with disability can sue them, sue the non-provider, non-compliance people. So that is the rule. It was earlier based on GIGW. It is getting revised. We are in the process of discussing with them. Support to ministries on sectoral policy and standards making, and then associated announcement and ecosystem building. DOT and the Ministry of INB exercise has already been gone. I mean, it's going, you can say loosely. Other support to METI and DEPWD policy making and implementation exercises that is being provided by the CAI project. Progressive rollout of accessible ICT products and services, development, procurement and testing, compliance criteria and methodology, including voluntary product acceptability test. VPAT is a very popular global thing. Manufacturers themselves declare which product is compliant and to what extent what is compliant, because that's a very important methodology. So this last bullet is something we need to begin, something we have mildly begun, but a lot more exercise is involved. See, this accessibility journey is not a one-day wonder. It is a journey. So this is the important exercise. I hope today's deliberation will be valuable in that exercise. Learning from the best practices of other countries. Of course, Isaac Newton said, I am standing on giant shoulders. Same is the case in our case, India's case. So we have leveraged the enormous work done by the standards agencies as well as the people behind them. WCAG 2.1 of W3C, EN 301549 of European Union, which include HC, CEN, CENILAC, all those agencies, and of course, so many other people there. Similarly, ADA 508 and thereof. And then many others also. For instance, ISO adopted WCAG 2.1 as a standard. And now I'm involved, or many of us within the BAS are involved in, as well as in entire SC 35, are involved in IEC deliberations and active assisted living. That is one of the accessibility, one of the important component in that, including global deliberations. Adding India-specific requirement, I already mentioned to you. What we did was leveraged on that. It's understood thoroughly, so that we are ready to implement it all the way from online banking to transaction processing to payment apps. So a whole lot of scenarios we have discussed and analyzed, which are direct relevance to our own people, hardware, software, etc. Adding India-specific requirement, I already mentioned it. We have already we are using a lot of resources and experience from elsewhere, and we are building our own. So we think over a period of time, we should be able to share our own experience to the rest of the world also. So leveraging opportunities for bilateral and multilateral cooperation and collaboration. So I guess this is what as the future journey goes. There's a lot will happen, because after all, India is 1.4 billion people, and we have 400 billion industry, ICT industry now. It is going to go further. So we have a lot of things to offer to the world also. Road ahead, this is the last slide by the by. Taking forward Indian accessibility journey. The important thing is all of us need to come together. What we noticed was even globally, even companies cooperate, countries cooperate. So therefore, within India, we have to build the accessible India. Therefore, all the stakeholders, we have historically not always necessarily worked together. So we need to do that as success in this exercise. Adoption and implementation in a coordinated manner by all stakeholders in every sector and for all ICT products and services in a planned but accelerated manner. Keep up with the standard journey, national and international. The technology is moving very fast. So many of them are actually, as you see in the next bullet, are going to be very aiding accessibility, AD. Therefore, a standard cannot be static. So that's why we have to participate and nationally and internationally in standards making, make them a vibrant forum. Leverage emerging digital technologies and universal design thinking. For instance, AI, ML, AR, VR, they are all super technologies for accessibility. Different interfaces, seamless shift across voice, data, video, text. You know, so many examples I can quote. IoT, wearable computing, brain-computer interface, gesture control, robotics, speech recognition, NLP AI, and conversational AI, specifically for Indian languages, auto translation, image auto tagging, using ML and auto captioning, audio video. So actually also most importantly today, given the India's mood, we must promote the Atmanirbhar to capture innovation, affordability and scale. Also specifically in this accessibility area, because accessible product we can build because of the scale. Elsewhere it's built may not be everything, but still globally so much things that people have done. The Microsoft is a super leader in this area. You know, because of some of you know how Satya Nadella is so committed to this topic. So that Google, enormous work they have done, and then Apple very much there. So we should leverage all that as well as build our own innovation, the kind of technology which is the previous bullet I mentioned. Build a robust institutional mechanism with lightweight rules to support policy and regulation for effective implementation. So acknowledgement, I want to thank a lot, but I will leave a slide for 10 seconds for all you to know how much we owe to so many people, so many. So this is just an illustrative list. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramakrishna, for that update on the ICT accessibility standards here in India. It was an extremely interesting and illuminating presentation. Thank you very much for that. With that, I now want to move on to the panel discussion. It is my honor to hand over to Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma. Dinesh, before you take charge, let me give a short introduction for the benefit of the audience. Many people already know you. But Dinesh is our co-chair at BIF's Committee on ICT for Inclusive Ability and is Director for Standards and Public Policy for the EU project SETI. He has over 30 years of industry experience and represents European standards organizations, including ETSI, the European Commission, and the European Free Trade Association in India. He also holds various industry positions, such as Chairman of the Advisory Committee for M2M and IoT Forum of India, Chairman for the Standards and Policy Working Group of the IoT panel, and holds active memberships at the TEC, DOT, BIS, etc. Dinesh, over to you.
Thank you, Rajatji, for your kind words and kind introduction. It's indeed a pleasure, you know. Before I go ahead with the panel discussions, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to TV sir for giving us this opportunity to be a part of this working group you started, sir, and such an important and a vital subject. I mean, I feel privileged to be associated on this. I would also like to say my kind regards and namaste to Sani sir, Sharma sir, fellow working group members who are attending this, and dear delegates. So distinguished panel today we have invited truly represents the key actors involved in the development and implementation of ICT technologies and policies, and as well as standards. First of all, let me request all my panelists to be please turn on your camera and be present so that I'm aware of. I do see Mr. Jamir is there. Mohammed Iqbalji is there, Rinaji is there, now I see, and Chakravarti sir is there. So panelist is complete, so I need not to skip any introduction when I start the session. So let me first briefly share or set the context of this session. As we all are aware, and I think we heard from Professor Dr. Ramki about the development, the way forward, accessible India. So while we have reached to a stage, we need to continue this journey. I mean, and when we continue this journey, we need to do a lot more to achieve and make in reality the accessible India. Accessibility of ICT and product and services will definitely facilitate, and as TV sir highlighted, let's call them spatially able or differently able people. We have to make sure when technology is evolving and innovating in such a fast pace, and we are making best use of it to make a comfort of our life, whether it is work or personal life, we must ensure that this technology is accessible to these people who are spatially able or differently able. Government of India has already released, and I think we all are aware of it, that many policies have been put in place. I mean, as far as policy is concerned, there is no question that the policy framework does not exist. And now with the standard drafting of the standard, this important standard, which is harmonized with Americans, with Europeans, and the WCAG 2.1, which is the latest version to make the website accessible. I mean, I think the groundwork is in place. I need not to name all the policies. Like, for example, there is a right of persons with disability policies in place. It has gone through certain amendments as well. We do have a disaster risk reduction guidelines as well for the disability inclusiveness. Even the TRAI came out with recommendations earlier for making the ICT accessible for persons with disability. Even our national digital communication policy does talk about very strongly about this subject for making ICT products accessible. So while all these policies are in place, and now with the standard development activity completed at least for one important standard, which talks about the ICT procurement, especially government procurement, whenever the ICT procurement happens, it lays down the guidelines for the requirement as well as the confirmatory assessment. But let's continue with this discussions. We still foresee, I mean, what we discussed in our panel, and we keep on discussing it, we still see a lot of challenges, in terms of policy implementations, campaign implementations, and now the standard implementations. So the purpose of framing this panel is to basically talk about the challenges, and the solutions, recommendations, how best we can take it forward. Post this webinar, we will consolidate all the inputs which came from our earlier speakers, or it comes out from this important panel discussions. We'll consolidate that, and this working group will continue taking it up with the government as well as the standard development organizations. So with that context setting, let me first invite our first panelist, Ms. Reena Garg, who's Scientist F and Head of Electronics and IT Department with Bureau of Indian Standard, for her intervention. But before I ask her for her interventions, let me briefly introduce her. With 29 years of experience, Reena ji has handled standardization work in important areas like information system security, electromagnetic compatibility, Indian language technologies, safety of audio, video, and IT product. She's also a committee manager of JTC1, which is a joint committee of ISO and IC. Under that, there is a subcommittee called number 7, Software and System Engineering Subcommittee. She has represented India in various IEC, ISO, JTC1 meetings related to Indian IT standardization activity. She's also worked in confirmatory assessment activities of BIs, including compulsory registration scheme for safety of electronics and IT product. Madam, floor is yours for next minute. And we would like to hear the BIS role, which has gone into development of this important standard. What challenges do you foresee when we talk about its implementation? How best we can address them? So we would like to hear from you, and what more we should do as under your leadership to work around these more and more standards. Oh, floor is yours. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dineshji. A very good morning to all of you. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Broadband India Forum for organizing this very important dialogue and giving BIS an opportunity to be a part of this. And as you all know, just a brief introduction about BIS, that it is a national standard body of India, and it was established under Parliament Act, BIS Act, 1986, and the act has recently been revised in 2016. And the responsibilities entrusted to BIS under this act are harmonious development of the standardization activity, marking and quality certification related activities. So the standards by BIS are formulated through set of technical committees and following a very democratic, well-defined mechanism and procedures. So at present, there are nearly more than 350 technical committees in BIS formulating standards in various disciplines of engineering. And we take help of experts from the country for formulating these standards. And presently there are more than 25,000 experts nominated on these various committees. And talking about the ICT area, electronics and ICT area, I am heading the standardization wing relating to electronics and IT. So we have 34 technical committees in this discipline, and one of those committees is catering to the work of accessibilities, ICT accessibilities. So this committee has so many details have been provided by Dr. Ramki also about the committee's work and committee constitution and how the committee has worked in evolving the very important ICT standard for accessibility. So this committee is titled as LITD 35, Active Assisted Living. And this also is closely liaisoning with the corresponding international IEC committee, the international counterpart, which is IEC System Committee on Active Assisted Living. So the participants, the members of this committee also take part in formulating international standards to make sure that the Indian specific requirements are incorporated in those international standards. So that we can directly straight away adopt those international standards as Indian standards when they're published. So only the members of this particular committee have the privilege to participate at international level from BIS in those international deliberations. So coming back to the important standards which has been recently published by BIS, IS 17802 Part 1 and Part 2. So this important standard done by this committee by a group of eminent experts, which have been mentioned by Dr. Ramki also. And the stakeholders, the BIS committee mainly consists of wide cross-section of the stakeholders, which includes government departments, R&D institutes, laboratories, and academia. So we had almost all possible relevant departments, government department on board while preparing this standard, like MIT, DEPWD, MOHUA, DOT, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and so on. So as a result of very tirelessly working and for about 8 to 9 months, we were able to publish this standard 17802, which has been notified in the Gazette by BIS. And this standard basically, it is the technical adoption of a very well established European standard EN 301549, and the modifications were like limited to referencing the relevant regulatory context in reference to Indian regulation and laws pertaining to disabilities. And the official languages of India have been incorporated additionally in the standards. So the purpose of this standard, basically the document, is to provide the functional accessibility requirement applicable to all ICT products and services. And it also describes the test procedures and evaluation methodology for each of these requirements, each of these accessibility requirement in the form which is suitable for use in public procurement. So it is a very, very important standard and Bible for all the relevant stakeholders who want to ensure that the products are complying to requirements relating to accessibility. So the document also provides details about the Indian specific requirements like support to Unicode, support to Indian languages and display in mobiles, and the use of recommended fonts as a choice of PWD users, then Indian language captioning and subtitling, Indian Sign Language, and Indian language support in messaging, and so on. So like all these factors have been taken and incorporated in the standard. And I'm pleased to like inform you that the standard can be downloaded free of cost from BIS website. Both the parts of the standards are available at Indian website. So I would urge the community, the stakeholders, to please go through the standards and like look for the how it can be implemented, understand the standard, be along with CTAC. I have constantly been like arranging for the awareness workshops, and we also have in plan in future, like every alternate months, BIS is holding the awareness workshop for making the like standards understandable and making people aware of the standard. And I would urge all of you to go through it, download it, and make use of the standard. It is definitely going to be, it is a crucial document which will support the objectives of our India accessibility campaign and in the ICT field. And as far as the implementation of the standard is concerned, so it is with the help of all the stakeholders, and we have to, whatever BIS produces, the standards which are notified, legally they are like voluntary in nature to be adopted by the community. But the line ministry can always issue orders, the quality control orders, to make these standards mandatory for implementation in the country. So it is like the BIS job as far as is concerned for publication of the standard is over. Now there has to be consultation within the with the line ministry and with the help of BIS certification. Like there are various kinds of certification schemes. There are third-party certification. There are self-declaration of conformity. So which under which which scheme should we consider the standard for implementation? Like that has to be the like there has to be a wide stakeholder consultation regarding this also. The viability, whether third party is possible, whether self-declaration is possible. So all these discussions are still awaited, and the line ministry along with BIS, along with DPWD, they have to come together with the stakeholder consultation and reach to a conclusion how legally it would be implemented. Voluntarily, everybody can implement this, taking the standard, going through it and adopting it, implementing it in their workspace. But like legally, how it should be, what should be the legal structure, that is yet to, the discussions are yet to be taken place and decided the further course of action. So I think that's all from my side. Over to you, Dinesh ji.
Thank you very much, Heenaji. And I must commend the shortest possible time in which this standard was formed. Making it free of cost for download is a very good step.
Stop my video button. More on mute my microphone.
I think you are on mute, Dinesh ji. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I kept saying. Thank you very much. No, thank you very much for highlighting the wonderful efforts which BIS has taken up, releasing this standard in 8 months, making it free of cost for downloadable format in a PDF format so that people can read it, and it is accessible document. So yes, I also encourage all the participants or the delegates to please download this standard, understand this standard, and implement it in your organizations. Yes, I make a note of your comment that regarding the implementations or a faster implementation. Of course, the wish list is to have the voluntary implementations, but if we need to make it faster, the line ministry should carry out a stakeholder consultation, which is pending. And I think we will continue working with the line ministry to discuss how best we can implement it so that the benefit reach to the end community. I would also urge all the participants, all the delegates, I think on behalf of Reena ji, please join this technical committee, take up your subject of interest, whether we need to form an Indian standards or adopt a global standards, take up this matter as part of this technical committee. And the last comment on your statement, I would say that uh, 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 there is a cooperation agreement between SENS, ANALAC, NHC, which is the European Standards Organizations, with BIS, with the help of which we have adopted this standard. I go back to the statement of Dr. Ramki. India can share a lot of information from its learning, from its journey. So I would encourage that the BIS should set up some kind of communication channel between BIS and ESOs on this important subject so that we could take up Indian requirement to this global platform. With that, I am sincerely thankful for your participation. Let me move on to my next panelist. And our next panelist is Ms. Karishma Chabra. She's a lead accessibility and strategic initiative government affairs team at Microsoft. And she's also a co-chair of this Broadband India Forum's Committee on ICT for Inclusive Ability. Before I invite her, let me briefly introduce her. A management and a business law graduate with over 16 years of experience across different verticals. She's deeply passionate about purposeful digital inclusion and is an evangelist of accessible technologies to empower everyone. She advocates the use of inclusive design principle and has been a speaker at various government, academia, civil society, and industry seminar on use and benefits of inclusive technology. Floor is yours, Karishma, for next 5 minutes, please. And we look forward to hearing from you what all Microsoft is doing. I think we heard from Dr. Ramki that Microsoft is doing excellent work in this important subject, including standardization. So please share how it is implemented globally, what Microsoft is doing, and if you have any challenge to be highlighted around this implementation, and if it is a challenge, if you have any recommendations and suggestions, please share with us. Floor is yours.
Mute my microphone button.
Thank you, Dinesh ji, and good morning, everyone, to all our esteemed guests, panelists. In fact, some of them I have had the opportunity to interact at some occasions in the past, including Ms. Garg when the standard formation process was happening, the BIF members, and a warm welcome to our audience who are here to attend and give their time for this important topic. I am honored to have this opportunity to be a part of this diverse and seasoned panel here, and grateful to be co-chair of BIF Committee on ICT for Inclusive Ability for Persons with Disabilities. Coming to the question that Dinesh ji, you just asked, I think we all know that in the current remote and hybrid work culture, inclusive technology is more crucial than ever. Access to employment, education, healthcare, government, citizen services, especially for over a billion plus people with disabilities worldwide, who face this challenge twice as much. And disability, whether temporary, situational, or permanent, can affect anyone at any point in time in their lives. So I think this fact we all have to be really, really conscious about. At Microsoft, we truly believe in that designing with and for people with disabilities will lead to greater innovation for everyone. and our mission statement to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. It just doesn't begin and end with the products that we create or the services that we offer. It actually extends to our culture at workplace and to approach inclusion in everything that we do. And it also includes how we are helping other companies or academic institutions or nonprofit organizations, government entities to be more inclusive. And Microsoft globally has had positive experience working with the governments who have actually led the way by added accessibility to their procurement policies. For the longest time, we worked globally. I mean, in the US, we worked with the US government, which was the first to develop an accessibility standard for procurement and include accessibility in their procurement policy. More recently, we worked on procurement with government of Europe, Canada, Australia. And the governments have all integrated accessibility criteria into their procurement policies. So the use of most comprehensive and up-to-date accessibility standards, which is the European Accessibility Standard EN 301-549 as a measure for product conformance. In fact, we are working with other governments, both in India, locally here, and other parts of the world, like I called out, now, who are in process of exploring adoption and an accessibility procurement policy that we all are talking about here, and are ready to implement, which is the topic of today's conversation. And like Ms. Reena Garg also mentioned, the role of all the stakeholders, which is very, very important here, especially the line ministries, because until we all come together, the real implementation will not happen. So everybody is an important stakeholder in this topic to come together and take it forward. You talked about, you did mention about the challenges, Dinesh, and I think what we've learned from our experiences around the world, and we've seen in standards and procurement processes and some of these challenges and what can be done to actually avoid them, is the successful implementation of accessibility into government procurement process requires getting a buy-in from the top level government officials. So I think it's very, very important and a lesson that the leadership has to have the skin in the game. It's important for the realization to come from that level. Once the policy is in place, education and awareness, training programs for the procurement staff is very critical, because it has to be a top-down approach. Everybody in the line should be aware and made aware of the process. And because without training on accessible technology, the standards and best practices for interacting with the technology vendors, suppliers can become difficult, especially for the staff to carry out the policy, to make it, to help people make wiser choices on accessible technology. I think it's also important to remind everyone that adopting and implementing procurement policy and standards is actually very doable. And a lot of, there's so much work and awareness around the world that's happening. And we have examples that I just called out. In fact, within India, we have smart cities, which are looking at accessible technologies to be implemented in smart cities. So it is important that we all come together. It is doable. It's just that it needs that little effort for us to take it to the next level. And in fact, there's an organization called G3 ICT. It's a UN. We just heard the introduction of Dr. Nirmita, who's representing G3 ICT in India. It's an organization that's actually working towards and participating in a lot of consultation process with the countries around the world. They have a ton of resources available on how to adopt, implement these procurement policies. And I really urge the audience who's listening to us and all the stakeholders, anyone who's interested, can go and learn more on G3 ICT's website. There's tons of material there that can be referred to. Yeah, in the end, I just want to say that it's a collective effort. Industry, government, academia, civil society, industry bodies, everybody has to join hands to make this possible. Thank you. You're on mute, Dineshji.
Mute my microphone button.
Thank you very much for reminding me, because I just want mute so that there is no noise around it. Thank you very much. So if I could make a note of the challenges which you highlighted, I need to summarize because we will be compiling these reports. So intergovernment consultations. I mean, first of all, the government leadership has to put the implementation of the standard, which is nothing but the procurement, ICT procurement, should be put as part of the policy measures. And I know even as you highlighted globally, there are legislations, there are directives which are mandating and ensuring that it should be done. So a subject like this, if it is mandated through a legislations and directive, is a good step forward. And then we must take it up with the ministry and the government. Education and training, not only the stakeholders campaign like Accessible India campaign, but also the departments who are working on this subject, they need to be given those trainings. And when you talk about smart cities, for example, there is a different ministries responsible for it. So the RTWD ministry should ensure that this kind of policy measures and whatever actions they take, it should be communicated to these different ministries altogether. So thank you very much for sharing these key points. We will summarize it. With that, let me move on to our next panelist, who is Shri A. Chakravarti, Scientist E at STQC, which is testing the department or an organizations under Ministry of Electronics and IT. Let me briefly introduce Mr. Chakravarti. He has over 35 years of technical experience in the field of electronics and IT, having started his career in the Electronics and Trade Technology Development Corporation Limited. He has earlier served working in R&D at MIT, Communications and Broadband Technology Group, with a foundation level certificate in the software testing from International Software Testing Qualification Board, which is ISTQB. In 2009, he is involved in website quality evaluation of government websites as per GIGW since 2013. He was also involved in a number of software testing projects of national importance in EU governance project. Mr. Chakravarti, your intervention for next 5 minutes, and we look forward to hearing from you on the role STQC has played. I know they were participating in the development of these related standards, all of these standards, and what role STQC can or will play its effective implementation, sir. And if you have
Yes,
anything else to share around this subject, please feel free to share it. 5 minutes.
thank you, Sarmaji. Yeah, I'm from lab side, from STQC. So STQC has played a key role in the development of Indian standard 17802, through active participation in drafting of Indian access standards. I myself was involved in drafting of Part 2 accessibility for the ICT products and service determination of conformance, especially for web section, that is web section 9 and other sections as well. So STQC has a certification scheme for government websites and mobile apps. This GHW is based on GHW, which is based on the standards of ISO and W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, that is 1.0 and 2.0, and RPD Act 2016. This current standard covers EN 301549 and WCAG 2.1 RPD Act of 2016 for various ICT products and services like hardware, web, non-web documents, and non-web software. GHW certification scheme follows a website evaluation model with the general requirements of some 36 checkpoints and accessibility requirements, which are again derived from WCAG 2.0 for web. So we have a scheme for websites and mobile apps certification. And also for mobile apps, we have some 32 accessibility requirements and 4 general requirements. Whereas IS accessibility evaluation test procedure with the accessibility requirements based on WCAG 2.1 covers web, non-web documents, non-web software. So generally the GHW may be revised to include the accessibility requirements of Indian standard, that is new standard, and followed for web and mobile apps. So we need actually a revision in GHW. That is the first requirement. And other sections, hardware, non-web software testing and certification will not fit directly into the GHW. They are actually different sections and area. So the requirement as per GHW concerned, GHW testing involved in quality.
Sir, we lost your voice.
Quality, functionality, usability, and accessibility. Whereas the ICT standard, our new ITC standard focuses only on accessibility aspects. Yeah. So the problem is directly implementation of this new standard. So there may be a separate scheme from STQC if at all required to be tested by STQC and certified for the products of hardware. It means ICT product, hardware, software, and non-web documents, non-web softwares, etc. So for first thing is the challenge is that we have to identify the testing lab who has to test and certify this new standard. So that is the one challenge. And also there are after that the testing tools and infrastructure required in the testing labs. Again, the testing has to be done manual testing as well as using automated tools. The tools, actually the commercial tools availability in India is a challenge, because we don't have a commercial tool in India for assessing the web as well as the mobile apps. So there is a big challenge for us, and we use mainly online service tools, online accessibility evaluation tools, which are free, and it has its own limitations and also security issues for us, for the country. So we depend on these free tools, which scans very few pages, maybe tens of pages, whereas the website will have hundreds, thousands of pages. So that is also a big challenge. So we should have indigenous development of evaluation tools, as well as the screen readers for the testing of the standards violation or accessibility violation. In technical terms, some HTML, CSS, broken links, broken anchors, and browser compatibility, color contrast, and screen readers, mainly used for visually impaired people. So these lot of tools issues are there. So that needs to be addressed. So even the browser screen reader tools or software or having some limitations. The quality and performance are not up to the mark, which are actually some other tools, online tools we are using. The tools are having quality issues and performance issues, like screen readers, NVDA and JAWS. So many other things are there. So these all issues needs to be addressed maybe locally by our indigenous test and development report for making availability of tools for implementation in the labs. These are the major challenges. So that I would like to emphasize. These are the points from my side. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for highlighting these important, first of all, updates, and second, the challenges. And if I could make a note of it, for sure, the GW, which is based on WCAG 2.0, need an update. The guidelines need an update for 2.1. So we will include this as one of the activity. The challenges which you highlighted is genuine challenges that we need to have more labs, which means identification of these labs, accreditation of these labs based on their capabilities and the infrastructure development is definitely a challenge, but I think it is an addressable challenge. As I understand from CDAC and Dr. Ramki, because this standard is a very generic standard. it talks about entire ICT hardware. It talks about entire ICT software, product, processes, systems. It's a very generic. Now we have to add the devices which we know are the most critical devices for the benefit of these special people. So they have started an efforts to create guidelines while including these categories of devices, hardware or software. For sure, I mean, the most important is the website, and the second is the mobile app, which is for which something exists, and we need to upgrade it to 2.1. I do understand about your comment around the tools. Of course, when you download these free tools, there are security concerns. So we must not make use of these free downloadable softwares for the sake of security. But then we need to upgrade our infrastructure in terms of these evaluation tools. So maybe this is another important area where ministry should award or create some kind of funding which can be given to the STQC and other labs, while the research and innovations to create these indigenous tools could be given to CDAC, for example. CDAC, when they are handling this subject, they are doing a good work. And maybe that particular working group should take on this particular project to work on it. Dr. Srinivasan has says, good comment being made by panel. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So I think that is a very important point, and we must take it up, sir.
Call me.
Concise it and then send it to Ministry of Electronics and IT for their suggestions. Thank you very much, sir. With that, let me move on to our next panelist, who is a great friend and strong contributor to our work, who has been associated with us for a long time, Mr. Mohammad Asif Iqbal, who is an associate director with the PwC. Let me briefly introduce Mr. Iqbal. Having the distinction of being one of the first blind MBA in HR from Symbiosis, Pune, he's paved the way in creating reservation quota for the disabled across IIMs, IITs, and all government universities in India way back in 2000. He has led the integration of digital inclusion initiatives for apps and multi-purpose smart cards designed for digital payments. A regular speaker on diversity and inclusion, he has also authored many articles on diversity and inclusion, published in leading journals, newspapers, and magazines in India. Past president of the Welfare Society of the Blind, he designed and implemented the social inclusion strategy for Aadhaar enrollment under the leadership and guidance of Shri Nandan Nilekani and Dr. R.S. Sharma. Mr. Iqbal, your intervention for next 5 minutes, please, and we would like to hear from you. Do you have any context or comments around the current policy and standard implementation in India? Are we doing enough? Do we need to do more for the implementation to make them available for its uses as early as possible? So, floor is yours, Mr. Iqbal.
Thank you, Dinesh Bhai, for this warm, kind words of introductions. First of all, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay, great.
You are.
So let me go on to sharing 3 personal stories, a short one, of course. Story number 1, the COVID, which actually made me feel, yes, I'm blind. Yes, I lost my eyesight at the age of 16. Well, during the COVID days, when we were experiencing a lockdown and we were all working from home, we had a stock which was available for 2-3 weeks of food and essential items. I think I'm living with my daughter, who is 11 years old, and with my wife, who is not so tech savvy. The challenge was to procure food and essential items when the stock lasts. Well, I thought it'd be very, very easy. Just like everyone else, I would be able to just pick up any popular app like Big Basket, Spencer's, Grofers, but now it's Blinkit, and just order it with ease. And the delivery would be there at my doorstep with no problems. But when I tried using each one of those apps, I'm afraid I could not use it with my voiceover, which is the talking software installed onto my my iPhone because it was not created with universal design incorporated. I thought maybe this is one of a kind. I again started using another app, Grofers, the Spencers, but the story, or more or less, was same. It was extremely frustrating, and again with a lot of uncertainty because we had no idea when the lockdown was going to be over. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I had good neighbors who I can rely on. But this, for getting my food, groceries, and essential items. But this was definitely not sustainable. You know, one of the great things I worked with PwC is that we have a great relationship with existing clients. And I remember sitting on an airplane to Mumbai on an assignment. I was sitting next to a CEO of a more retail who happened to be in my neighborhood, but I knew that they do not deliver. I did call him up. He didn't answer. I sent him a text message and he called back. I narrated the entire ordeal to him that, so if you do not come to my rescue, I don't know what's going to happen to us and my family. I cannot keep asking my neighbors to get this, get that. Well, he immediately agreed that, okay, no problems. We will make sure that the food and delivery items will be delivered to you at your footstep. Well, the problem was solved. Then the magic van came and the vaccine came. I was all excited because we again landed up with another beautiful government app which was built in very little time, but perhaps missing the critical component which is called accessibility. I did try to register myself with ease, but when I wanted to schedule myself for vaccine of my family members, again the app let me down. It wouldn't allow me to click with using my keyboard. And it was just really, really frustration, and I had to take sighted assistants to help. Well, I remember, the pre-COVID as a consultant, and I still do, but maybe the travel has come down a little bit. But pre-COVID, I had a lot of travels, and I enjoy traveling. So I remember we, as part of PwC, we all have an access to called self-booking tool through Yatra. But guess what? When I tried booking it, I couldn't do it because the calendar or the dates which you're supposed to select, we could not do it with a keyboard. We have to use it with mouse. And as a blind user, I was not able to use it. I remember an incident when I had to come back from Delhi. It was 6 p.m. flight. And the colleague that I took assistance in booking it, he booked me up on 6 a.m. flight. I didn't do a web check-in because of lack of time. And I arrived at the airport and I learned that my flight has already gone in the morning. And then after I insisted, they put me on at 8:30, but I had to pay around 15,000 rupees just to come home. Perhaps this is the price of being disabled. Well, we are always talking about challenges, but I have met, as part of my assignments in digital inclusions for smart cities, I have met two IT secretaries of a large state who had no ideas what assistive technology is. And then I had to educate them and then said, oh my goodness, I didn't know that blind people can even use technology to function. Or people who are motor disability who has no limited functionality can use technology to function. Well, I see an immense amount of challenges. Perhaps the software developers teams are not aware. I recall an incident when we were working in Chhattisgarh and we wanted to make sure that we had a digital inclusive smart city. And one of the e-governance model we tried to do, and the developer team insisted that they will have to put a CAPTCHA. And I said, why? Then he said, the STQC will not give a certificate if we did not have CAPTCHA. I said, why can't you put an alternative authentications uh, like a logical reasoning or like an audio CAPTCHA? He said, no, they will still reject it. So I really, really think that we need to relook at the systems And as Mr. A. Chakravarti pointed out, I think we really need to revive that processes and tools in order to do an efficient job. I recall another incident when when we identified a list of issues as I was working for one of the central government projects, and they said, the vendor was nice and he solved 5 out of 25 issues which I pointed out regarding digital accessibilities. And he said, I'm sorry, we cannot comply with all of you because this is not part of our scope of work. So absolutely, I think it is need of the hour is that MITI needs to come up with a sample procurements, or which should be as a part of a sample, as a part of a standard RFP, that this accessibility, both in terms of hardware and software, needs to be there. Yesterday, I went to a doctor to check for my dad at Apollo Hospital in Calcutta, and I was paying the fees, the consultation fees for the doctors. And guess what? I, of course, like everyone else, I just gave my debit card, and I didn't want to do the Wi-Fi, but I wanted to, use the PIN because I feel it is probably a little safer transactions. And guess what? They gave me a unit which had no keyboard, but only the touch screen, but with no output which can guide me to enter my PIN. I finally had to kind of take my dad's help, and I had to, whisper my PIN numbers. I don't know, because it was noisy, so I had to say it out louder. So it actually compromised my security and everything. Indeed. So how do we actually solve these problems? Well, I think number one, we have to have a greater awareness, not only to the software development community, but to the decision makers in the government, especially maybe maybe the IT knows, but maybe we need to do a greater exercise, that we need to have this kind of integration in all the government projects that we're talking about. Well, the last point that I'd like, one of the major challenges that whenever I went, with
Iqbalji,
an off,
Mr.
yeah,
Iqbal,
I'll just take 30 seconds. 30
yeah,
seconds.
please.
One
Yes.
one of the greatest challenges that I feel when I approach a government authorities or the local authority or the product developers, they perceive that integrating inclusion or accessibility is a costly affair, but that is not true. The cost is very minuscule compared to the benefits it laws. And anyway, for the government projects, cost is not a concern, and even for the product, it should not be a concern because it is actually adding a revenue to your bottom line. Thank you. Over to you, Dinesh.
Thank you, Iqbalji. And I have made quickly, I will summarize the short note which I have made. Apps need to be accessible. Web-based solutions, which could be a kind of app, for example, the COVID example, need to be accessible. Uh, Awareness need to go to the state level, and awareness means government stakeholder need to be educated first. Then only a campaign like Accessible India campaign will really work and go down to states and to the end user benefits. Inclusion of accessibility as part of smart cities, and I think Karishma also highlighted, we have made a note of it. Model RFP update to ensure that inclusion of accessibility is a part of it is another important suggestion you have made it. Hardware like POS machine, I completely agree that whether we need an external device or an update to the POS machine, it is a very important financial instrument, and I think it need to be made accessible. If I see all of these suggestions, probably even if the RPWD Act is in place, we still need some kind of legislations on top of it, more from an implementation point of view. And when we talk about a consolidated legislation in India, it should cover all these areas as part of the legislation so that it's mandatorily implemented. So we have captured these points. Thank you very much for providing your valuable insight as always. And now let's, considering the time, because we're running out of time, I mean, it's an important discussions, but let's move to our very Next panelist, we are fortunate enough that Mr. Jamir Dhale could take out time and be with us. So if, he's a founder of Society for Empowerment of Deafblind. He himself is suffering from deaf blindness. I mean, so let me introduce before. We had a call with him in person because to save the time, because just 5-minute intervention will not sufficient enough for a person like him to share his thoughts and processes. So we had a call earlier. We discussed. He shared his lot of input to me. I will go through it in brief, those recommendations. But let me first introduce Mr. Jamir Dhale. He's a person with deaf blindness and is a founder of the Society for Empowerment of the Deafblind, which is SEDB India, the first trust run by deafblind people in India. The organization aim is to empower deafblind people with better education, training, assistive technologies, employment opportunities, and his organization is also advocating to protect their right from any discrimination. He was also the board member of National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation, and Multiple Disability, which was a statutory body under the Ministry of Social Welfare and Justice and Empowerment as part of Government of India. Upon my interaction with Mr. Dhale, as I understood, although couple of challenges he highlighted in my last conversations, I would like to go through it first, and then I would invite him if I have missed something or if he would like to add further on it. Although the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, CPRD, has significantly recognized deaf blindness as a distinct disability group in Article number 24 on education. And the CRPD committee has also recognized deaf-blind as a unique disability in several general comments and concluding observations. And even when India is a signatory to this UN CPRD, the government of India has still not recognized deaf-blindness as a distinct disability group, and instead they include deaf blindness in the category of multiple disabilities in the RPD Act 2016, which overrides even a couple or a handful of existing state laws. Hence, Mr. Jamir has some suggestions, or he has highlighted some key solutions and recommendations, which we will surely compile and submit to the Government of India. They are: deaf blindness should be recognized as a unique disability in the law and practice, which means the Government of India should make rights and needs of deaf blind people aware to all the state governments, and the society which is responsible urge them to frame and adopt state rule for the RPDWB Act of 2016. So each state should also adopt these rules once they categorize this. The individual state and territories of India must be urged to ratify. So it's associated on that. The unique requirement is it should be recognized as a key category of the deaf and blindness, not as a general category. With that, there are more recommendations, but considering the paucity of time, and we have a copy of this paper from Mr. Jamir, we will share it. We'll post it on our website as part of this webinar, and from there we will summarize the consolidation also. With this, let me request Mr. Jamir Dhale for his intervention, please. And please share your journey with disabilities, how you have learned to deal with the technology, what steps are needed from your perspective to address these challenges faced by the deafblind community, and how much government have addressed as per your opinion, and what more is needed for the effective implementations of government policies and now a standard as well. So over to you, sir. Thank you. And I know she's helping him to have the communication with us. Dr. Renuka.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be meeting all of you. Here I am Zamir Dhale. That's my sign name. I am deaf and blind. So in short, I was born deaf, but as time went on, around the age of 10, I lost my sight gradually. And yes, the set of challenges started. It wasn't an easy life for me. There was no accessibility. At least for the blind, there is accessibility, through speaking. But for deaf blind, it's a real challenge, and there has been no accessibility because we have to do everything tactile. And so I really, there was no technology also. And after I finished my education, in the year 1999, I came across some deaf people, some blind people who were working with their headsets and microphones, and they were talking and they were working on their computers, and they were working very efficiently. But for deaf blind, there was no such technology available. And I was really interested in gaining access to some kind of technology for my personal use, for my communication. And I approached my teachers and I requested, but at that time there was no provision made for any kind of accessibility or communication technology for a deaf blind. And after a series of debates and discussions and advocacy and creating awareness, I went through a course on communication technology, and I was able to communicate. I was able to communicate. I was able to use Facebook and do GPay and different things like that. And it really made me independent in my communication with various other deafblind persons as well. And we started creating awareness about the need for accessibility. I have 3 points to share here on this platform. The first one has actually made our lives much easier. Yes, technology has made our right to vote much actually possible. So we can actually walk to a polling booth and feel the voting machine and cast our ballot. Yes. And we have access to our right. The second one, of course, is something that I want to mention, is about the CAPTCHA, which is posing a huge challenge for us. So when we want to book a ticket online, it's just a challenge. It is impossible because we are not able to do, carry out any such work on our own, and we want that access. And we are having to depend on others for this access to help us to be able to do these things. So I want to be able to have direct access to book my own ticket and carry out such transactions. Another one is, again, the ATM. I have to depend on, when I go to a ATM to withdraw some money, I have to depend on the security to help me to punch in my numbers, So, but if we can, there is no tactile interface here. And so that makes it a major challenge. Sometimes there's so many errors, mistakes made on our part to have to keep punching in the numbers and for lack of clarity and accessibility. So if the ATM is, the machine is connected to a braille device, it makes it easy for us and gives us independence in carrying out our own transaction here, especially sensitive and security related work. So we can withdraw the amount key in our password without anybody's help and having that security, being assured of that security as well. So this is some awareness that needs to be there in the community and in the government sector as well.
Just one last thing. Samir also added that technology right now, like Brailler and etc., are very expensive. We require the government to provide subsidy for persons with disability and make it cheaper so that they can buy this kind of assistive devices.
Thank you very much, Saurabh. That's
Thank
a very
you,
important point. Yeah, that's a very important point, that technology, product, and solutions should be subsidized to make them, affordable to these people. I mean, I would suggest that they should distribute it freely when they're distributing so many things free of cost. And this is more important than anything else. So technology, product subsidized is a very important point. And thank you very much, Jameer-ji. And we do have a paper. We do have your summary of recommendations, which I try to summarize it, considering the paucity of time. But we will surely incorporate them as part of our submission to Government of India and especially Ministry of Electronics and IT and the RPWD, plus the standards organization if applicable. So thank you very much, sir. We don't have time much. I had few questions, but we have two important questions which are posted as part of our Q&A window. We would like to go through it. I think it's more finding out more information from us. It's not a question. So let me read first, which has come from Mr. Vimal Vaklu. Happy that this important topic is being discussed. This is a big challenge for people who are differently abled. Has BIF submitted any white paper on this to MITI? And what has been the response? Would you like to take Rajatji? Because we have prepared, we have contributed a lot of papers through white papers and through various others, even the GIGW last time. So please, would you like to take it up or and share? I mean, of course, please, you have something to share or? No. So I can say that as part of this working group, me, Dr. Narasimhan, and Karishma, and other working group members, we have prepared a lot of contributions. Even the last GIGW, we prepared a paper which we submitted. But sir, this workshop which is carried out, it is highlighting many new points which possibly we did not cover in our last submission. So for sure, as part of this webinar proceedings, we will consolidate certain recommendations and key items which should be shared. I would ask first, Karishma, even you can highlight the FICCI paper which was prepared and where we consolidated all these inputs, and then probably we can ask Dr. Narasimhan, if she's still here, what different work we have done as part of this BIF working group.
I would also like to add also, Dineshji, that MITI also has a universal access board also, which keeps meeting time to time and reviews not exactly standard, but reviews on accessibility.
Okay, thank you, sir. Made a note of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you,
please.
Dineshji. Absolutely. I think as part of BIF, we continue to work on creating more and more awareness, whether it is through workshops or white papers or these digital dialogues. I think we continue that. And I also represent on the FICCI's task force for people with disabilities as part of their DNI. And Microsoft collaborated with FICCI to release this white paper, which also talks about what is the importance of inclusive design, why do we need procurement policies and standards, and this was last year before the standards actually came out for India. So we continue to work on this path and absolutely welcome any other suggestions that you may have, because like I said, and I think all the panelists have alluded to this is a collective effort. We all have to come together and no one person can really make this happen. So happy to have any suggestions if anyone has.
Thank you, Karishma. And Vimalji, we would like to seek your inputs and suggestions further to to draft this white paper or the summary of recommendations. So we will definitely incorporate your valuable suggestions. With that, let me move to the next item, next question from Mr. Anil Joshi. He's talking about our national education policies, which was announced. He highlights that it appears to have missed providing to leverage benefits of technologies in all areas of inclusion. Now, the new policy, which is under finalization stage, but appears to have overlooked role of accessibility ICT in the areas of like education, skill, employment, and so on. What recommendations BIF can suggest to Ministry of Social Welfare and Justice so as not to miss it again in coming decades? Thanks, Anil Joshi. We will have to, I think you are highlighting, you just said National Policy 2006, and I understand it is, you are highlighting the education policies, but we will contact you for more information, and we have made a note of it, and we will surely include that it should be taken up as part of this working group. Then we have another question. What is the time frame when audio description will come in force in domestic OTT platform? Dr. Srinivasan is writing some answer, but this is the work in progress, and this is exactly what we need to do as part of our next activities after the formulation of standards, because we discussed creating the guidelines and include those new products for which we can frame the guideline for their implementation. So this is another important comment you have made. Any Indian organization
I think Dineshji, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting is already working on this. So we have been associated, BIS has been associated with them in various meetings. So they have been working on this aspect of captioning, subtitling, and all these sorts of things.
Absolutely, that's a good point. And even they were working on standards as well. Harish Kutian, even I think Dr. Srinivasan has answered your information. He was looking when will the standard going to be notified and adopted by issuing the appropriate rules. So I think he's updated. We have to take it up with the PWD for revising the rules. So it's work in progress. It is likely to be issued before long. We have last question. Any Indian organization has digital accessibility policy, IT firms, banks, or any sector? I'm sure, yes. And maybe I can request Karishma to share some insight how Microsoft is handling this. He's asking if any organization has digital accessible policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. While Microsoft, like I mentioned, we are deeply focused on accessibility and we're deeply committed to inclusive design. Our policy is, we actually, inclusive by design is what is our design policy for all our products and services. But I'd also like to quickly comment on one or two companies that I know of, which are Indian companies and who are deeply committed to accessibility and inclusion. For example, the bank, State Bank of India, Microsoft has partnered with them, and there is a program which is going on to skill persons with disabilities in financial sector to make them employable for jobs. So there is a lot of commitment from banks like SBI. There is Axis Bank. I've seen work is going on. ICICI Bank has also been in conversations with us. So definitely, if not policy, but there is an intent, there is a commitment to clearly make that difference. TCS does a lot of work. I'm sure with quotes, I'm sure this can be verified, but they will have a policy because they have a complete department which is focused on accessibility, right from creating product dev to working on programs which are for social impact and benefiting larger audiences. And there could be many such other companies. Indian startups, we are in conversation with so many Indian startups who are focusing on innovating for accessibility in India. So I will not just quote it with the word policy, but I'll say there is intent, there is commitment. And this is why forums like these make a lot of difference to create that awareness and bring more and more Indian companies and stakeholders on board to actually work towards creating a digitally inclusive India.
Thank you, Karishma. With that, I think our Q&A session is over. In conclusion, when I close this panel discussions, my request is all the delegates who are participating, I'm sure you have an interest. That's why you are attending this particular session. My request is either you join this working group of BIF, come forward, start contributing, start working with us, suggest us so that we can together work for the benefit of these spatially abled or people and then take it up with the government or the standard makers. Second is, even Reena ji has invited, if you have an interest to contribute about standard formulations in India or adoptions, please join that LITD 35 technical committee. So with that, I close this session. Thank you very much for your participations and for providing the valuable highlights around the challenges and some recommendations as well, which we will consolidate together as part of this working group and submit to the government and continue working on it, for the benefit of all of us. With that, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Over to you, Rajatji.
Thank you very much, Dinesh. And thank you to each and every one of our panelists as well. This has truly been an extremely informative and very, very illuminating in many ways discussion on the subject, which is so complex and so many people don't really know enough about it. I am conscious of the fact that the challenges around the implementation have been adequately brought out, and all the inputs which have been provided will be kept in mind as BIF moves forward. It's unfortunate that Mr. Rajiv Sharma, who was our special guest of honor, has had to be called away on an emergency. Therefore, we will miss the benefit of his interaction with us. But I would now request TV Ramachandran to kindly welcome and introduce our chief guest for this session this afternoon. Over to you, TV.
Thank you, Rajat. Thank you. I would first like to say it's been a fabulous time listening to all these great experts and specialists. And it's awesome their amount of knowledge on the subject. And the key words that keep hitting us is that of awareness. How many of us are aware of there's so many things that have been done, so many other challenges that remain. And in fact, the government has done a lot. The Bureau of Indian Standards has done a lot. MeitY has done a remarkable amount of work. So we need to be aware of this and take it forward. I think that's a key message coming. And the point which I heard also, which is very unusual, we always talk of bottoms-up approach. I'm hearing after a long time the need for a top-down approach here. This is something on which the leadership has to take a championship, take up the championship, put this forward. Truly great learnings from all your expert panels. I'm very, very happy to have been listening to that. And we from BIF will try to do our best to contribute in this effort. I now have the proud privilege of introducing our chief guest, Shri Ajay Prakash Sani, former Secretary MeitY. He is an IAS officer of the Andhra Pradesh cadre, 1984 batch, and has served in the Government of India as Joint Secretary Training, Department of Personnel and Training, and as President and CEO of National E-Governance Division. And prior to his stint in MeitY, he was also Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. And he served a very impactful tenure in MeitY as Secretary. He was one of the driving forces in MeitY, facilitating accessible and secure internet for all. And he retired from the position recently. I would like to say something. Not only was he a driving force on accessibility, he had several remarkable things, many, too many to recount in the short time given to me. But what I would like to talk about is his unique role in driving internet governance. Internet governance is, there is an Internet Governance Forum in Geneva, part of the UN, and that has been in operation for many years. But it was Shri Sani who made it happen last year. And as you all know, inclusion is one of the most vital elements of internet governance. And we had sessions on this in the first ever India Internet Governance Forum 2021, which happened thanks to Mrs. Sani, and excellent discussions in that on accessibility and inclusivity. So I think it is a great privilege for us to have you, sir, today, Mr. Sani, to preside over these proceedings. And we would now request you to kindly address our guests, the audience here today, on this, what has been a very vibrant discussion on the vital topic of ICT accessibility, something very, very dear to our hearts, to all our hearts. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Mr. Sani.
Thank you, Mr. Ramachandran. And first of all, thanks for organizing such a wonderful digital dialogue on an issue of tremendous importance for all of us. I think it's I've listened to all the speakers who have been participating in this program today. And I must say that the work that is done by PIS, by Ministry of Electronics and IT, by other ministries like INB, DOT, TEPWD, and other organizations like Microsoft, which is represented here by two of the by experts here, and the entire session has been extremely not just building up my awareness about this subject, but it has also been a fairly inspiring session, looking at how much has been accomplished. This is only to be balanced with an awareness of the humongous amount of work that now needs to be done. First of all, being able to prepare such a comprehensive Indian standard, 17802, in a short time, that too in the face of the challenge posed by the pandemic. I think it's an amazing feat, and I compliment BIS and all those who participated in this. Dr. Ramakrishnan brought out in fair amount of detail as to what all is addressed by this standard, and having a standard is absolutely essential. We must also be aware that it is not sufficient. A standard is an enabler. A standard is a guiding light on what all needs to be done. And once a standard is in place, especially an Indian standard, first of all, it is helping us focus on issues relating to users in India, to the consumers in India, to the people who require this this kind of facilitation, and giving a voice to them, giving a recognition to their requirements, giving not just informal recognition, but a formal, a legal recognition to their requirements. It deals with the requirements for various functional groups. It also deals, as Ramki had beautifully explained, with the Indian language enablement, and deals with a wide gamut of products, services, systems, hardware, software, content, applications, all kinds of, all aspects of making ICT accessible to the especially abled people. There is still work to be done, as Zamir Dhaleji has pointed out. There is tremendous amount of work to be done. There are categories to be recognized. This might require further elaboration for many of those categories, and then effort on conceptualizing what all needs to get into implementation. First of all, I think it has to begin with awareness, spreading awareness. I'm pleasantly, I was happy to note that CDAC and many other organizations within the government, with the participation of BIS and experts who are present here, and many other experts who are not present here, have already gone into awareness building on this front. It's important that the standard is known to all the people, to all the organizations, to the government departments within ministries within central government and the state governments that are responsible for bringing these concepts and standards into implementation. A fair amount of capacity building will need to be done so that those who have to implement these standards are not just aware of those, but feel confident of the steps that they need to take to seek budget, and there will be many non-budget interventions as well, so that they get on with the humongous task that is before all of them. I think it's also important to especially recognize and prioritize the issues of making content accessible. In this content accessible of also helping different apps, especially the very popular apps, the apps that are in tremendous use across the country on e-commerce and various services, to understand and implement the standards within their offerings. It's important to also ensure that the work which is in progress of taking broadband to all, to everyone in the country, leaving no one behind, goes ahead and reaches fruition. Broadband by itself, sometimes the mobile device which is used by many for accessing broadband is not adequate in itself to provide accessibility to the differently abled, the specially abled. It's important that first of all, the work of spreading access to broadband goes on rapidly, connects each and every home. Devices become available. The current set of devices becomes available, and new devices get devised for devices and attachments to phones or the tablets or PCs, so that the differently abled with different functional disabilities are able to get access to the content and to the services. This will require drawing up of plan for implementation within key ministries in the central government and in the state government. So helping them formulate such a thing, starting with one or two, and then helping them formulate such a plan is going to be extremely important. Organizations like NIC, which has a huge spectrum of apps and services available to people, the National E-Governance Division, CDAC, such organizations have to take the lead in embedding these standards at the earliest possible into their offerings. The work that is there on languages is especially noteworthy. I think a large number of, whenever it comes to the challenges to be addressed in India, the challenge is not just by sheer numbers. The challenge is also on account of the diversity, because for each of the functional groups, making the content and services available not just in English and Hindi. A large number of services are available simply in English, not even in Hindi. Making them available in Hindi, making them available in all the languages, making text-to-speech functional, addressing issues. I'm happy that a very simple thing which we never notice otherwise, that of CAPTCHA, has also been highlighted in this session. So where there is a problem that is posed by a technology offering, I think the technology itself has to find the solution, and it's good that we have had this discussion today, and and some of the issues have got highlighted. I would like to call out a few efforts which are ongoing, which may have a very significant bearing on the work that is being done and that is possible to do. The very first one is Bhashini platform, bhashini.gov.in. Bhashini is BHASHINI.gov.in. This is a platform for enabling technologies in languages, all the Indian languages. And this was recently launched by Honorable Prime Minister. And within this is something like what Aadhaar is to identity, or UPI is to bringing convenience in electronic payments to everyone. It's a national platform. It is not confined to services that would be provided by government or government departments or ministries. It will also be a exchange or a marketplace where APIs are available for various products that get developed with the extensive use of artificial intelligence. And these APIs can not just be used directly, they can also be embedded into various apps and can be used to convert content into a large number of Indian languages, almost with ever reducing manual effort. So this will not eliminate manual effort entirely to begin with, but it will start making the process much more efficient and require much less manual effort to achieve those results. For instance, where TED Talks or lectures or content is available extensively in English or in some of the foreign languages, making it accessible, translating it, subtitling it in Indian languages, using text-to-speech to make it readily accessible to those that can see or hear the content. I think all those services, all those applications, all those technologies are likely to come in rapidly through this effort. So I would urge the entire community, that is all those who are present here, the experts who are present here, to make themselves familiar with bhashini.gov.in, especially the Universal Language Contribution APIs, ULCA, which is like UPI. It is the equivalent of UPI for digital payments. And in this, some models are already available. So do go and visit and try out those models, and then be the advocates for this effort. it would be wonderful to get colleges, schools, companies, various associations like NASSCOM and CII, FICCI, and others also involved in this effort. Because the more the people participate in this, the greater the benefit for everyone. It's a open platform where most of the technology and services will remain available free of cost, and some source code, etc., would also be available so that those can get embedded everywhere in our technology ecosystem. The similar effort I would like to call out is in the national public digital platforms that are emerging. A national public digital platform is emerging in healthcare, the Ayushman Bharat platform, which comes with the ABDM account, Ayushman Bharat account, and Abha. And in this, once again, it is the universal health interface akin to the universal payments interface, unified payments interface that is there for digital payments. And a large number of companies are now participating in coming on, onboarding this national platform, and through the platform making their services, making their offerings available to everyone in the country who has a Aadhaar account. Everyone who has had vaccination already has an Aadhaar number. So you just have to discover what your Aadhaar account number is by going to the relevant platform. As this takes shape, due to the sheer numbers that we deal with in India, it will also become a huge marketplace. When we went out with UPI, entities like Paytm, PhonePe, Google Pay, Amazon Pay, and various others have taken shape, and they have become huge entities. And today, almost in every shop in the country, you see a QR code, which is not just a QR code for a particular application, but it's an interoperable QR code. So that kind of transformation may start happening in healthcare. A similar effort is also going on in through NDR, a national platform for school education, and NDR for higher education, for which the exercise is currently on. All these are platforms that are likely to be operational in the next year to 3 years. And in these, I would urge that we have a special emphasis on embedding these standards right from the inception, so that we don't go forward building huge new sets of content and services to which the standard has to be applied later. As the content and services start coming in place, it would be wonderful to have a concerted effort as a part of each of these national platforms that tries to embed these standards in whatever is getting created, and do hand-holding for those that are creating content and services. These sandboxes that are associated with these national platform efforts will require efforts to also build in the enablement for both for capacity building and for testing out the functionalities and seeing whether new content and services are coming in with enablement of the Indian standard, which is now existing. So these are some of the thoughts I had wanted to share. In addition, I am very enthused by the prospect of new technologies that are coming in very rapidly. Technologies that are being brought in by robotics, technologies that are coming in by way of AR and VR, technologies that are coming in through the geospatial route. A large number of these technologies, a complete bunch of technologies that is coming our way through application of artificial intelligence, especially the natural language processing, the automated speech recognition, the text-to-speech, OCR recognition, handwriting recognition, and all of these technologies and more, and the translation technologies as well. So I hope that we will, through these huge national platforms and marketplaces that are coming in place now, we will create not just as a not just as something that is made available through a foundation or a governmental effort, but actually create the economy of scale for startups and businesses, making it worthwhile for them to create new content, new services, which become accessible to this extremely important segment in our country, so that no one is left behind in making use of the content and services which are becoming available to everyone else. And finally, I would like to also call out one small effort, but a very, very important effort, which is the use of technology in preventing disability, in recognizing when the disability starts setting in. Right from the birth, through a process of systematic screening and tackling different things. This is a part of what is called the RBSK, Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram. And I think some effort by the entire community and all the experts in becoming aware of what is it that RBSK attempts to do, and in lending weight to that effort of the government, so that there are many disabilities that can actually be slowed down, whose setting in can be slowed down, or which can be prevented altogether if they are recognized well in time. So this also needs tremendous application of effort, and maybe some of these standards will go hand in hand, making it possible for us to address the huge challenges that are before us. I hope that with the kind of dynamism we have in the country today, with the kind of technological capability, the combination of communications, broadband, IT, and electronic manufacturing, which is today available with us, that India will take the lead in creating solutions which will address not just the 40 to 80 million that we count within our country, but potentially 1 billion across the world who require similar services and content and services. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Shri Ajay Sani ji, for attending today's session, taking the time out from your schedule. It has really been a privilege and an honor to hear your words of support and direction. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. Before we come to the conclusion of today's session, it is now my privilege to invite Ms. Karishma Chhabra, who has already been introduced to us, to propose a vote of thanks. Karishma, over to you. Karishma, you're on mute.
Sorry, am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mukherjee, and thank you for moderating today's session so wonderfully. Really, thank you. And on behalf of BIF and the committee, my deepest gratitude to our chief guest, Shri Ajay Prakash Sahani ji, for enlightening us with sir, your wisdom on the subject, as well as bringing out government's contributions in making India digitally inclusive especially the various national platform efforts and marketplaces that you called out, the role of artificial intelligence and other modern technologies, sectoral interventions, health, citizen services, prevention, and many more. And moreover, acknowledging the need for more forces and efforts that are required in this area. We actually missed our special guest of honor, Mr. Rajiv Sharma. We wish him well. Special thanks to our special guest, Dr. Srinivasan Ramakrishnan, for giving the audience the glimpse of standard creation process and insights into the preparation of its implementation. I also extend on behalf of the committee our sincere thanks to the esteemed panelists for the insightful reflections, possible solutions, and need for effective implementation of these policies in India. Thank you, Sir Mr. T.V. Ramachandran, Dr. Nirmita, my fellow co-chair, Mr. Dinesh Chand Sharma, our wonderful audience who spent their precious time today to learn and contribute to this important topic. And last but not least, the BIF Committee for Inclusive Ability for Persons with Disability members who've actually tirelessly worked behind the scenes to make this digital dialogues possible today. I do want to take a moment to actually acknowledge the work that the committee has been doing and done so far in this space. We came out with a white paper on priorities, this is for COVID-19 world, on ICT accessibility for persons with disabilities. This was submitted to all the key stakeholders. The committee also took part in IIGF 21, which organized by Nixie and Métis. We did a workshop there and submitted a paper on universal design as a backbone of digital inclusion. Mr. Mukherjee already mentioned earlier that BIF's website has been made accessible, and all the sessions that BIF organizes are organized on accessible platforms. And we have a sign language interpreters in most of the sessions. With that, I just want to close by saying that accessibility can't be more important. And just reflecting on our friend Muhammad Asif's stories, there are million such stories which are unheard. We are fortunate that we are here at this time. We have this opportunity not only to bring those stories forward, but I think being intentional about empowering those millions through inclusive tech. We all require to come together, create that awareness, and take conscious steps towards, first of all, implementing these standards, and then how we can further the journey of mainstreaming people with disabilities to make India more digitally inclusive. Forums like these, digital dialogues, and many such forums are a great step forward in the right direction. All the key stakeholders, including government, coming here together gives me a lot of hope that we have like-minded people who are committed to this common goal. Once again, thank you everyone for your time, your commitment, your passion towards accessibility. Let's work and make India more accessible. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, each and every one of you. And just as a last word, we will be sharing the link, which has been broadcast on YouTube, with each and every one of our speakers and panelists. And please feel free to spread the word amongst your community, your groups, so that we can make the world a more inclusive place. Thank you, and I look forward to having you on future digital dialogues.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.